Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast. My name is Toby Hadoke, and I've asked a friend to choose a Doctor Who story and then to select in secret their favourite things about it. I then watch the episodes, commentate along, drop in observations and facts, and try to guess what those favourite things are.
Hello, I'm Gav Rymill, and I'm a writer and 3D illustrator for all kinds of things, including Doctor Who magazine and the Blu-ray range, and I spent most of 2020 illustrating the Dalek Combat Manual. And the story that I am nominating for you is Silver Nemesis.
Well, welcome everybody. It's time to watch the final episode of Doctor Who's 25th anniversary story, Silver Nemesis, which has been chosen, as you've heard, by Gavin Rymill, who is a big cyber kind of guy. He's a cyberman. So I hope you have it all lined up, and we are going to watch Doctor Who Silver Nemesis in part 3 in 3, 2, 1, and it will kick in at any random juncture. Here we are. At the beginning of part 2, I started getting lost as to whether the Silver Nemesis DVD had the special edition. I remember some controversy that there wasn't, because I think it was one of those budget range. Was for a while they decided to do slightly lower on the extras, didn't they? Anyway, whatever. You've got the DVD. But I remember my first encounter with Ian Levine, famous Doctor Who fan, a missing episode rescuer, writer of some of the early texts about Doctor Who as we understand it and our understanding of the history of Doctor Who. I remember talking to Ian about, and I think he was upset that there wasn't. Somebody's pressed the pause button there, haven't they? At the beginning, you can always tell when it's videotape is sort of paused, and it was something that used to happen until I think in television when they'd moved from being in film and VT to being outside VT, and the pause button was often used, and I think they realised fairly quickly, actually it's you can tell it's a bit naff, it doesn't quite work. I always think they look a bit higgledy-piggledy, the cybers, that they look brilliantly in formation there. They're all parallel, but in the circle, in the display on his thing there, some of them are sort of slightly askew, and I think they look slightly better if they were all parallel, because they do look like some of them sort of parked sideways. Whereas I think if they were in formation, at the end of the 10th planet would be great. That's a nice little piece of location. This stairway coming out of the ground, and this is not. These two work really well together. I remember DWM did an interview with them years later, and they still had a nice sort of rapport. Yeah, she's doing a very good job with a particular kind of Doctor Who-y part. But yes, Ian Levine, I remember, was very, very sad about Silver. I mean, sad. I'm apoplectic about the special edition, I think, not being on the DVD. And I said, but some would argue that that this edit had stuff cut out of it because you cut stuff out to make stuff better, to make it more streamlined, to trim the longueurs, to make the action flow better. And I said, sometimes just because you have more stuff, it doesn't mean that the story is better, and perhaps that the director would prefer actually the broadcast version because it's actually paced how he wants it to be. And I remember Ian looking absolutely baffled to go, yeah, but this way, i.e. with the special edition, there's more. And I Ian is a character, and there's nothing I'm saying now that I wouldn't say to him. But I think that's where they say it is meaningless. That's the piece of script I referred to that in the last episode. That's a nice shot. But yes, I think that sort of sums up Ian, that idea that no, if you can have a thing where it's got more, that's better than having less. And you go, okay, well, that's it's a theory. Yeah, so apologies to listeners of the last episode. There was a cyber scene that I had mistaken for the bit where they say it's meaningless. This was on the trailer, I remember, as was the shot of them running towards the castle. They work very hard to make this work, and it's I think it's an idea that works nicely on paper and is almost impossible. Yeah, I mean it's impossible to stage. Having the chess symbolism and all of that, and Sylvester and Sophie are game and do it very well, but it makes the Cybermen look like absolute prawns. And that should have been abandoned, but there we go. That I think is glorious. I love the Nemesis costume and the glowing effect. This is terrific. I love all of that. So let's forget the and that's really effective. That scream and that's a model. Look at me with my I keep spotting models. I should watch Hollyoaks. That's all sort of spooky stuff, and I sort of like the effect it has on Lady Painfort, because it is kind of her, isn't it? Yeah, she's she's doing this very well. And there's Chekhov's arrow in a TARDIS. They've location wrecked this very nicely. There's a sort of suggestion, wasn't there, because they had headphones on, that they'd been sort of slightly cybernized-y or not, but and again, the poor Cybermen have to sort of... David Banks had to get in the way of the other Cyberman so that then the Nazis could escape. They have to do some blocking which with modern... with modern ways of shooting, where you'd shoot various close-ups, and you could go in a lot closer, and you could take walls out to have different camera positions. That's the other thing about shooting on. Oh, there's a dead rat hanging from the door. That's horrible. That's the problem when you're all on location as well. Is you sometimes you just have to put the camera in the corner of the room because that's all you've got. And we've got the silver coins there that are going to come in useful later. And of course, all this chess stuff comes into importance. Ricardo Mulhall. Why do I know that that's the name of the hitcher? I don't know anything about it. I just remember reading a cast list and his name was on it. There we go. I hope he's happy. He's got enormous hair. And I think Kevin Clark is the driver of that car, isn't he? See, I like all of that. I think there's something sort of rather charming about these two people from the olden days wandering around, and they're both lovely actors. This is a great setting as well. This big old, whatever it is, aircraft hangar. I think they've for the fact that they can't build anything, they've it's been really intelligently sort of wrecked. Yeah, she's gone batty. Right, yes. As if to rival the skinheads, we're about to have Mrs. Remington. I'm afraid I didn't have a clue who Delores Grey was. Where are you folks headed? I mean, bless her. I mean, I find this funny now, but I'm not for the reasons I think anybody at the time thought it was. So does it matter that the humour I derive from it is is not what was intended. I'm not talking about this. This is the statue. This is lovely. That's all great stuff. And this is a sort of intriguing what's going on with this statue. And what's the Doctor up to, and how's the story going to end? Well, at the moment, the three different factions of baddies are all walking to it. Well, they're driving to it. So we have a comic interlude here, but yeah. I'm not going to pretend I particularly enjoy these scenes. Seeing as it's a 3-parter, there are a lot of these sort of interludes like this one and the one with the skinheads, which don't really add much to the plot at all, which would suggest to me that even for 3 parts, there's not an awful lot of plot. I love Sophie Aldred. I think she's great. I sometimes do struggle with the way that Ace is written. I think she's often written as a teenage. I think I've said this in earlier episodes, or maybe I was just saying this to somebody. I sometimes think she's written as a teenage girl by people who've never met a teenage girl, have never managed to get close enough to one. But I think Sophie Aldred has a gusto and a likability that is impossible to deny, and I think she sometimes has to work very hard in spite of some pretty teeth on edge dialogue that she is given. But that said, she's not alone in this story. But this is all great. This is what my writer friend was talking about, who watching this as a 9-year-old. I mean, this is, and look, I love the way the Cyberman moves quite quickly as well there, because sometimes monsters in Doctor Who sort of amble very slowly, but he was charging along, which is very good. And the music, Kev McCulloch sort of banged in here. Yeah, this all works. I quibble. We may as well get to it, because I have nothing nice to say about these scenes in the. Well, I mean, because I don't know what Mrs. Remington is supposed to make of Miss Lady Painfort, because Lady Painfort is saying that it happened to her, and is she willfully ignoring that bit to go, oh well, you must be a historian even though you're dressed in the olden days and you're talking about it in the first person.
Here I am, driving around, and I pick up someone who's researching.
But that's not what she said. We surely do, honey. I mean, I think the look on the look on Gerard Murphy's face says it. I mean, it says it all, really. And God bless him for that. Now, I do slightly. I mean, this is all very exciting stuff, but is the idea supposed to be that every time she catapults a coin, it slots into that exact bit in the chest unit where we see the Cyber Leader pick one out of later? Or is it just that just hitting a Cyberman with a coin is enough to kill it? In which case, it does severely weaken the Cybermen, that just hitting them with a gold coin. But that said, this is all terribly exciting stuff. But it's a real effort to sort of grind the gold into their chest units in Earth. Oh, nice bit of explosion there, though, on the bit of wood. And I think we have another paused. Is there? Oh no, because her hand came in then. I thought the shot of the coins was on pause. But yes, so the effort to sort of clog that, to grind the gold into the chest unit in Earthshock is now replaced with just, I mean, do the coins not bounce? If the coins don't bounce off, they can't be strong enough to smash into the chest unit. So is it that she's being so accurate, or am I just overthinking it? I did, but at the time I was a bit like, my feeling was that they were suggesting that every time she hit the chest unit, she got them in that slot, in the coin slot. That's a fantastic shot of the TARDIS through the grille, and the light on her face there, and it's the fact that the Doctor's companion is, brassy enough to face them down, and so yeah, it's do the Dirty Harry thing. Are you going to be? Do you feel lucky? She's terrific, and that she of course makes the right choice, because she's paps David Banks, and then ducks so that those two, and then you've got the brilliant shot of the Cyberman falling down. That's a terrific sequence. That's really good. Not just because of the action; those shots through the grill from above are fantastic and quite giddying. But it's not just the way it's executed, and it's executed superbly, but it's also the fact that it shows the companion being very, very brave and very plucky, but then also using guile and being a bit ballsy. I love that. That might well be my favourite thing for this episode. I really like that. Yeah. He's got a great face, hasn't he? He's a bird-like melancholy. I always, yeah. And I mean, they do have the courtesy to say at the end, don't they? This is just like you nailed the Daleks. This is basically the same plot as Remembrance of the Daleks, isn't it? Oh yes, the Cyber Lieutenant we think at the moment has outlived the Cyber Leader, but of course we don't know the Cyber Leader's still alive. I'm not quite sure how this works, because this would mean that he knew that the Cybermen were gonna stand there at exactly this moment in order for him to destroy them. Which I mean, there's planning ahead, but I mean that's forensic guile. That really is. This is a great moment. I think this is really nicely shot. I think David Banks does it brilliantly, as he does it all. Yeah, and he goes, "Oh, I'm cross, and I'm gonna. Oh, but I'm hurt, so I'll sort of shake as I pull myself up." And of course, there's but the reintroduction of the Nazis done over that, because I think they're quite tight for time, and that actually makes it, move along quite quickly. I think that's his last line, isn't it? We are loyal to the death, which is a good job, because you're going to die in a minute, Carl. Not to the likes of you. And he Anton Diffring wasn't alive for long after this. I say, as I say, I think it's an ambitious piece of casting. I think he lived in France, and was very old at this point. But it's nice to say that Anton Diffring's been in Doctor Who.
I'm sorry, Doctor. I thought I got it.
Yeah, well, at least you're not saying is that why you saved my life, so you could kill the Nazis and then disappoint me? Oh yes, she is mad. Yes, she is. Oh, and he's very loyal, Richard. And this is good. And I remember thinking, but is that the same actress? And blah, 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 Oh, and I remember I remember this being really, really exciting. I mean, the Cyber Leader could have just killed them all at this point. He looks so good, Sylvester McCoy, in this sequence. He looks so good on camera. And that those darting eyes and suggesting us. I love that. I love Doctor Who. Oh, this was so exciting. I remember I didn't really sort of know what this was all about, but it was the fact that she said Doctor Who, which is great, because Doctor Who is not said very often in Doctor Who. But then And I love the way that she does it as well. Have you never wondered where he came from, who he is? I remember I was quoting that. It was so exciting. And it's brilliant because it doesn't actually go anywhere, but it promises great mystery. It's not blatant about it. And it doesn't. There's not now some big screed about, they say that back in the. It's 2 or 3 lines that just promise loads. Don't change anything about our understanding of the show, but just give a kind of hint to and that's all it is really. It's just whoa, but it doesn't matter because it just makes what's going on seem like it's much more. And that's kind of what Bad Wolf is. Bad Wolf doesn't really mean anything, but it doesn't matter enough. It's done well enough that the old time, the time of chaos. That none of it. The words are enough. The old time, the time of chaos, to make you think they're talking about something really important, but actually, it's so vague that it doesn't matter. So you don't actually have to create a great bit. And I like the way she does that what as well. It's like, oh, you've completely. Yeah, she thinks she's come to a knife fight armed with a machine gun, and actually she's come to a cannon fight armed. That metaphor ran away with me. A laser gun fight armed with a pea shooter, or with a machine gun, which is the equivalent of a pea shooter. The metaphors are getting away from me, but I think that for a story that's trying to do. This is an important celebratory landmark. I think that sequence where she goes, why is killing you going to help Ace? That's slightly different to somebody's watched The Demons and gone, oh, that bit where Joe does that's nice, but that's different. She's offering herself in the Doctor's place. She's that's anyway. It doesn't matter. Well done, Fiona Walker. You did your best there, and I thought she. I thought she did that whole Doctor Who sequence really, really well. It's a lovely piece of acting. She gave it absolutely the right welly, and I love that whole sequence because it and this is good music from Kev McCulloch as well. This is really a bit of welly. Yeah, I'm enjoying this, and that's a great shot. I mean, obviously it's just CSO'd on top, but the plume, the smoke plume is terrific. But I think that sort of climactic face-off, which just goes, this is slightly more than your average ending. This is one where we're gonna, suggest some sort of, big secrets about the Doctor, and yet actually reiterates the Doctor Who by her saying the words Doctor Who. Yeah, I love that. Terrific. So I'm actually stuck for things because, and that's just a nice little dramatic flourish, isn't it? He said, "Did you understand Lady Painfort's instructions?" And the statue said, "Yes, I did." And that was the big trick that the logical sideman would, of course, not seen through. And then we have Chekhov's arrow in the TARDIS that Richard, who's been crying out to do something heroic, having gone on quite a journey. He's met a llama. He's stood on his own grave. He's hung some skinheads upside down from a tree and not disabused them of the fact that he's a social worker. And he's a lovely character. But as I say, it's much more apparent to me this time round that, he's steeped in badness and dishonesty and murder. And of course, he's got that line about, I shall return to Briggs his money. And I think that's a reference to Ian Briggs. I met Kevin Clark at a convention. I've got Ian Briggs, but I've got a picture of Ian Briggs that I took as he was signing my book. And Kevin Clark sort of on his way out. And I think has he been kicked out or something like that? I don't know why, but there was certainly... I said, is Kevin Clark coming back? Ian Briggs said, no, probably not. And I never quite picked up on what had gone on there. But this is nice because Sylvester is so good at doing enigmatic. Yeah, that's lovely. and as I say, that just it's a story that doesn't. It's not like some of the other big anniversary stories, because it's a three-parter, and it's essentially everybody's wondering about. But you don't, which is, I suppose, the Five Doctors is too. But you don't have the advantage of having all the other Doctors to turn up to lend it something or anything like that. But that ending with the Doctor Who, and here's some that laudable thing of going, well, let's reintroduce some mystery to the character, which you do by creating a new mystery out of a few little dropped bits and bobs, and then the Doctor acting all mysterious and enigmatic, and Sylvester McCoy's great at all of that. He's really good at the sort of ghost of a smile, and those darting eyes and everything. He's got such a good face. So actually, I really enjoyed a lot of that. I'm afraid I didn't mind it, I suppose, but it would take a lot for me to do a long essay on the virtues of Mrs. Remington. But anyway, it doesn't matter. There was plenty there. I've got to choose my favourite thing. And I've got two, really, for that particular episode. I love all that stuff on the top of the gantry, and that face-off that Ace has, and the do you feel lucky, and the falling Cyberman, and then those glorious shots from above of the fallen Cyberman and the TARDIS through the grills of the gantry. I thought that was so nicely done. And actually, all the Ace and the Cyberman stuff is great, apart from that one caveat I have about how the coins work. But actually, that didn't bother me so much this time around, maybe because I was anticipating that it would. But I love that. I love that Doctor Who. So maybe I choose that as my thing about the whole thing, because I was going to choose the statue effect, which I think is excellent. I mean, I think quite a simple effect. So simple, Toby, you try it. I haven't got a clue. I think it's something about the material, isn't it? And you reflect light off it. It's like the Green Death, but it's the silver statue. But maybe, even though I think that's a glorious effect, and when the statue comes alive and stands up and all that explosion, I think I have to react to what I saw this time around. I think for episode 3, I'm going to choose Ace and the Cybermen, particularly that sort of triangular face-off and those aerial shots through the gantry. And then my thing for the whole story is also from episode 3, but it is that what it builds to, which is the Doctor Who, because that is goosebumps. That is hair on the back of your neck stand on end, and that, if you ever wondered where he comes from, who he is, and all of that, right up to the point where she goes, "What?" because he's double-crossed her. I love all of that. I really like that face-off. I really like the way that it's played, and I really like that that's what it's kind of been building up to. And I'm finding myself very enthused about a story that I probably rather dismissed a lot, and it even was dismissing a bit last episode. Yes, please. I haven't even mentioned the jazz. I like the jazz. Those are what I choose. What is Gavin going to choose? So first, let's get his thing for part 3.
Silver Nemesis episode 3. I can't wait to hear your positive commentary on this extravaganza. There is obviously really only one sensible pick, and that is the scene in the car with Delores. No, it's got to be David Banks. His performance as the cyber leader is just fantastic. His vocal work is sublime. He has this kind of silky movement and this stillness to his performance, but interspersed with these sort of jerky, semi-robotic hand movements. It all just combines to be this incredibly memorable character. And whatever you think of Silver Nemesis, I think David Banks' performance is wonderful. So yes, David Banks is my pick for number 3.
Well, I mean, I love David Banks. I think David Banks is one of the great things of 80s Who. The first time I saw the Cybermen was Earthshock. I didn't know how they spoke. I didn't know how they moved or anything. I just saw the pictures. And of course, he's very different from the 60s Cybermen, and I didn't see them till a lot later. And I like the 60s Cybermen, but they are far more. They apart from the very chatty ones in the 10th Planet, which are a very different kettle of fish. They aren't. That they're memorable protagonists in the sense that when there's vast numbers of them charging about doing things, they're not great for sort of face-offs or dialogue, which is why they realise it's much better to have a Klieg or a Tobias Vaughan or whatever. And then Christopher Robbie comes in Revenge of the Cybermen, and that doesn't quite work. But that's the bridge between the Cybermen of the 60s and the Cybermen of the 80s. But I liked them at the time at the 80s, but then when you view them in terms of the whole canon, it's obvious why they keep bringing him back to do that part, because he's so good. And as Gav says, that his body language is excellent, because he's not doing sort of breakdancing roboty acting, but he does enough with his deliberate moves and his stabby finger and his style thing that it seems right without being clunky and cliched. And the voice, it bridges that gap between the robotic but the emphasis and the character when it needs to be. I didn't choose David Banks. I could easily have done. I do truly think he's one of the great achievements of 80s Who. I think he's superb, and I think his contribution to the success of the Cybermen in the 80s is immense. And oddly, because he went well into it, and he wrote that book, and I've got the Cyber book, and he was very, he's at conventions, and he wrote books. And then when the DVDs were being done, I think he's on the Earthshock making of, isn't he? But then he didn't do the others. He suddenly just didn't do Doctor Who-y stuff. And then I've done commentaries with him for a couple of Phantom things, Phantom Films commentaries, which are great, but they don't have anything like the budgets of the BBC things. So it's like he missed out on actually the quite nice gigs, as it were, at this time when he decided he wasn't going to involve himself with Doctor Who stuff. So maybe they need to get him in on some of the Blu-rays, because he seems to be talking about Doctor Who again now. And he cropped up in Brookside. He actually had a decent parts in a couple of other things as well. And of course, a couple of friends of mine saw him play the Doctor in The Ultimate Adventure stage play, in which he was the understudy for John Pertwee and actually got to go on in his Greenpeace T-shirt. And what a great opportunity for him to have had, and how lovely it must have been. I mean, obviously disappointing at the time not to see John Pertwee, but to have had the chance to see a one-off Doctor, and people said he was great, and I'm sure he was. Terrific. David Banks is excellent. I am more than happy with Gavin choosing David Banks, who was a part of my choice. Okay, and his bonus pick is...
My bonus pick is a scene in episode 3 where Ace faces off against the Cybermen, and she has a chase through the metal concrete barn, picking them off with gold coins fired from a slingshot. And it was so incredibly exciting and so memorable, and inspired many a playground game when I was 9 years old, on my own, obviously. So yes, that is my bonus pick, is Ace versus the Cybermen.
Okay, well, I had that as one of my things, so I think I get out of a possible 4 points, I got 1 point. So Gavin is the winner, as is inevitable. So he struck gold appropriately. But I think by the time I got to the end, I have an appreciation of Silver Nemesis that I perhaps didn't have on my journey through it. So as I say, apologies for occasionally not accentuating the positive as much as I would hope to. But there are things I struggle with. I do think it's a it's a script that doesn't quite hold together and marshals its resources in some of the wrong areas. There's those funny little sort of, well, they're not funny enough. That's the problem. The skinheads and Mrs. Remington do not, I think, justify their position in a story that then is told with too much brevity elsewhere. So I think the script has balance issues. Although I love some of the central themes of the I think having the jazz running through it is a nice idea. Having the Wagner thing for the Nazis with the Cybermen and the we are the Supermen, you are the Giants. I think all of that sort of stuff is clever, and I think the Lady Painfort and Richard double act is a nice one, and the incongruity of them wandering around in modern times is quite nice, and the actors are great. And some of the battle scenes are very nicely done. The big battle at the beginning of episode 2, and then Ace and her catapult. So that's the second person this week who I've heard saying, "Oh, when I was 9, this was amazing." As I say, I was a bit more jaded as a teenager, and one must remember that there's always going to be an inheritance of that initial, "Oh, I'm disappointed because I'm grumpy," which this process and this podcast tries to, expunge. So yeah, it's is it the weakest Cyberman story of the classic era? It's hard to define Cybermen and Dalek stories from the new series because they sort of cameo in so many, which I think in many ways is a shame. If you're I think the big returns are slightly undermined by the fact that occasionally the two big bads can be window dressing in other stories. I think that's been a shame in the modern series on occasion. But that's a whinge for another day, and I'm not supposed to be whinging. I'm supposed to be being cheerful. So listen, Gavin has what a lot of people forget to do. Actually, he has actually done a sign off to plug his stuff. So let's hear a bit more about Gavin, who is a lovely chap. And I did, for a moment, I did think he was going to say Mrs. Remington. Did you see his little bluff? Hear his little bluff that he did there. That would have probably led to some. I was there thinking, you think you like a person. Anyway, what's Gavin got to say for himself?
Thank you very much for having me, Toby. It's been an honour to be asked and to be involved. And if you can't get enough esoteric Dalek knowledge, and if you haven't come across it before, please have a look at our YouTube channel, which is Dalek 6388, and we have a series called Terry Nation Army, where we delve into things so nerdy that even Toby won't touch them with a barge pole. So that's Terry Nation Army, which I do with John Green. Thank you and goodbye.
Well, I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole in terms of attempting to do that level of research, especially not into props. They're very good with props. I like people, so that's why I can tell you what happened to who the Thals were in the Daleks or whatever. But what Gavin and John do is they tell you what what happened to the middle section, or the eye stalk, and where it was last seen, or when that eye stalk was on that middle section in that story, when actually they were on a different middle section in another story. So they were moonlighting eye stalks or whatever. Yeah, Terry Nation Army, Dalek 6. I call it Dalek 6388. They call it Dalek. He called it Dalek 6388, didn't he? Anyway. It's fascinating stuff. I love Gavin's delivery. He's got a very dry sense of humour, and that comes across very nicely. So he wears his geekery with a nice sardonic air, which makes it very easy to listen to, but also makes you forgive yourself for being really interested in skirt sections and headlamps. And I've just listened to their latest podcast about the Dalek movie props in The Chase, and it just tells you all sorts of things you didn't know you needed to know, and is really, really interesting, and the level of research is fantastic. And yeah, John Green and Gavin have done some fantastic work, and their website is really, really interesting if you want to take a deep dive into stuff about Doctor Who that throws up lots of lovely little anomalies and things to look out for next time you watch a story, and some niggling little things as well. We can't quite work out why that was that and why that didn't happen there. And it just goes to show how many little aspects of particularly the fascinating 60s Doctor Who, of why that happened, and if that was that, and why this didn't happen, and it just goes to show how that there are still sort of mysteries out there that we'll never solve, but that we can ponder over and have opinions over and think about, and that's why Doctor Who bears revisit after revisit after revisit. And sometimes you will just revisit a story that you thought wasn't great, and actually have in the end learn to stop worrying and love, open brackets, some aspects of, close brackets, Silver Nemesis. But until then, whoever you are and wherever you come from, I hope you've enjoyed listening to this, and I will speak to you next time. Thanks to Gavin. Thanks to you. Take care. Thanks so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented with tedious regularity by me, Toby Hadoke. My special guest this time around is Gavin Rymill, who can be found on Twitter at The Mind Robber, but he also has that brilliant feed at Dalek6388. Well worth checking out. My thanks to Gavin and to the many patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Clive Lewis, Guy Lambert, James Lark, Gavin McLean, David Matthewman, John McClay, Ross McPhillips, Stuart Mitchell, Nathan Moore, Matthew Newton, Graham Knott, Dave Owen, Melvin Pena, Keith Perry, Jonathan Potter, Kevin Parker, Scott Pride, Dylan Rees, John Rivers, Mark Sandham, Jim Sangster, Matt Sawyer, Keith Say, Stephen Smith, aka Dalek Fan, Neil Tate, Nick Temple, Sabrina Tirabassi, Reynard Toombs, Apollo C. Vermouth, Gary Wales and Adam Westwood. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Yes, so thanks to all those patrons I mentioned. You could be mentioned alongside them if you become one of their number, which is easy to do and costs as little as £3 per month. For that, you get 3 releases a week. This is generally a podcast. Sometimes I mix it up. And I'm not even counting photos of my dog. They're like a bonus on a Tuesday. But there's 3, usually podcasts, but sometimes, a TV appearance or a play from my archive or an interview with an actor or Doctor Who production person that's not been released before. But yeah, you get 3 podcasts. So if you pay £3 a month, it's I think did I work it out? It's about 25p per release, which isn't bad. And actually, it's less than that if you sign up for a year, because you get 10% off your total donation. And that helps to keep these things ad-free. You'll have noticed no adverts, because I was advised to put adverts on in order to make this pay, but I just feel a bit dirty. He said, asking you for money, getting paid to talk, but I'm flattered that people do, and I just try and do my best and make stuff that you like. And so, yeah, if you want to do that, do. You can do one that doesn't require any sort of commitment. The Patreon is a sort of monthly thing, but you can cancel at any time. And that's ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke, where you can just donate if I've done something you particularly like. Perhaps if I've gone for a whole 15 seconds without saying which you'd think a professional broadcaster would be able to do. But, you see? Oh, God. I'm going to be so conscious of it now. I may be saying Morse. What I'm doing is my and as a Morse code, dots and dashes, sending out Doctor Who facts, subliminally. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. And if you like that sort of thing, only if you do, go to the various places where you get podcasts, iTunes, Podbean, and you can do this on Twitter and Facebook and everywhere else as well, and say nice things. The more attention that is brought to these, the more people may be aware of them, and the more people may listen, and the more people may listen, the less pointless these endeavours of mine might seem. Because if you podcast in a wood and nobody can hear it, are you really podcasting at all? 5 stars would be lovely on iTunes. That really helps with my algorithms, and they always need a tweak. And I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm at Excess Malarkey Comedy Club in Manchester every Tuesday. Gav Rymill, actually, who's the guest here, came the other day and he said he thought it was excellent value, and he was quite right. It's a fantastic comedy club, and there's an online version. There's an archive of the shows we did when we were in lockdown, because we carried on A, paying comics, and B, providing entertainment all through lockdown, which were both very useful things to do and not bad for a small independent outfit run basically on love and enthusiasm. And we got comics from all around the world for our online show. That's at twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey. Excess Malarkey has a Twitter feed at Excess Malarkey. It's an X, an S, and then Malarkey, MALARKEY. And I'm on Twitter at Toby Hadoke. And these podcasts have their own feed at Hadoke Podcasts. So everyone's been away this weekend, and I had images of getting so much podcasting done, but I've done barely anything. I haven't even done the washing up, so I better go do this now because they're due back soon. I've got a cup of tea outside the booth that I'm hoping is just the right temperature. I don't have a very robust mouth, so I have to let tea cool down a bit. But then if I leave it too long, it gets too cold, and you don't get the nice warm hit. So tea is a bit like a shower for me. There's a very small sort of range that I find bearable, which makes me sound like the Princess and the Pea, but I'm the geek and the cup of tea, the podcaster and the tea. Is the modern version of the Princess and the Pea. Anyway, I think I could have been more interesting about Delores Grey and that whole scene, but I couldn't drum up much enthusiasm either way, and I didn't want to start getting cross with it. But I'm sure, but there's also interesting things to say about her and what she represents, and the fact that it is quite fun. You know, the fact you've got this mad woman, this guileless American woman, and then poor old Richard looking on sort of dumbfounded. But I do, the comedy interludes. Well, you can talk, Toby. I've seen some of your comedy interludes, but anyway, I don't know. It's live, isn't it? I watch and I react, and that's what you get. And I hope it's all right. And actually, I'd forgotten how much I really enjoy the ending of Silver Nemesis, so I'm very pleased about that. That's not what I normally do in this post-credit bit. Anyway, my loved one's coming home soon, and so I'm going to go and drink my perfect temperature cup of tea, and then hurriedly go around the house, hiding the fact that if left to my own devices, I'm like Jamie and the two doctors. I revert to savagery very, very quickly.